Are we all back again? Oh, we're missing a planning solicitor. Oh, and a development manager. No, we'll wait for them to come back, then we'll start as soon as they come in. So committee, Mrs. Ormsby is going to give you a slightly updated version of the report on this application because there's been some modifications to the conditions, which you'll no doubt, Ian, find some more modifications to make. But it's not materially different from anything you've got in the agenda pack that was online, but we do have a few spare copies anyway. Has Councillor Smith got one? Yeah.
Have you got one?
Yes. Have I? No, I'm not sure I have actually.
Have you got one for Ollie?
I better have one.
I'll share
Just so just so we can see the.
Yeah.
Have I got one?
Oh,
Reference.
we're all sharing one. Oh, but,
Are we sharing
you, well, if Damien and I are going to share one, and if you share one with Wendy there, I think it's the conditions are the main difference.
Yeah.
You've read and digested already, Yehudi, have your speed reading course paid off? Okay. Right then. In that case, we are on to agenda item 11, application 251788 MOUT, land to the south of Harepath Hills, Seaton, pages 213 to 290 in your agenda pack, but you've got it in front of you anyway. Okay, so Jeremy Ebden, sorry? Oh, yes. We're, before we go on, welcome to Colin Brown, who's joined us. Do you have any declarations, Colin?
None.
Okay, I've already declared that we've all been lobbied from various sides on this application. Oh, have you not? You've been missed off the circulation list then, yeah? Had a lot of lobbying. Okay, are we ready to go over to Jeremy then? When you're ready, Jeremy.
Good afternoon. This application is an application in Seaton for outline permission for up to 72 dwellings with approval sought now for the means of access. Can you hear me now? Yes. So this is an application for up to 72 dwellings at Harepath Road, Seaton, in the location shown on the plan. Just for a bit of context, in terms of the policies that are applicable in this area, I've put up a slide to show the relationship of the site to the green wedge, which is shown in the green hatching here, the proposed employment and recreation allocation in the local plan opposite, and the built-up area boundary. As you can see, it falls within the green wedge and outside of the built-up area boundary under the current local plan. Just for reference again, this is the site shown in relation to the Regulation 19 proposed local plan and the allocations therein. So members will see that the site is no longer proposed to be a green wedge in the emerging local plan, and the site falls within Seat 03 housing allocation. The missing element here in the corner, if members may recall, was subject of an earlier application from Baker's Estates relating to housing and the provision in this location of a football pitch. And there was a resolution to grant that permission pending the agreement of a legal agreement. The built-up area boundary then extends around the allocation site in the new plan. So in the Regulation 19 plan, the site is allocated for around 75 dwellings, which does actually also include this corner here. This plan just shows the relief of the site. It slopes upwards from east to west and is comprised of a couple of fields with a hedgerow in between and hedgerows surrounding the site. You can see the edge of Rowan Drive here, which is a previous Baker's Estate development. It's now completed. This is the proposed access onto Harepath Road, on the west side of Harepath Road, into the site. This access shown here is what was agreed in principle, subject was resolved to be granted as an access into the other site on the opposite side of the road. This is an illustrative landscape strategy showing the access point here from Harepath Road, with the access road potentially serving both the residential development and also access into the football pitch club area. This is an existing hedgerow in this location here. Members may recall that this area is in a pinch point relative to the Beer Quarry Caves Bat Special Area Conservation, which has required the delivery of quite generous landscaping and ecological mitigation for developments in this area, hence why it's being suggested there'll be generous landscaping around the site to maintain dark corridors for bats. This is just some further detail on the illustrative landscaping master plan. This is proposed drainage strategy on the site. The drainage strategy will be subject to the Reserved Matters application in detail in terms of the layout and direction of the drainage scheme and any sustainable drainage features such as an attenuation pond shown at the bottom of the site here. This shows Harepath Road looking north. As you can see, the access point will be just in front of where I've taken a photograph here. And then this is looking from the corner of Harepath Road and Harepath Hill through the field gates. You'll see the existing hedge line, which bisects the two fields at the moment. This is a composite 3 photographs just showing a view across the bottom field, if I can call it that, towards the estuary and the hills opposite and the town. You can see the employment units, the existing employment units down at the bottom here, and the houses on Harepath Hill to the left. This is the top fields taken along the line of the hedge. It's Rowan Drive in the background there. And then looking up the hill, or across the top of the hill to the top of the site. These are the houses opposite the site on Harepath Hill. And just a wider view from the top across the site, Rowan Drive in the foreground there, and the estuary beyond. So the main considerations in this application are the principle of development, including the green wedge, the provision of affordable housing, landscape effects, effects on heritage, effects on residential neighbouring amenity, effects on ecology and biodiversity, including effects on the SAC at Beer Quarry Caves, sustainable drainage, and the loss of agricultural land. So as I mentioned earlier, the site at the moment lies outside of the area plan for development in the current local plan. It's outside the built-up area boundary. It lies within the green wedge of the current plan. And so in principle, it doesn't accord with the existing local plan. Members will know, of course, that we do not presently have a 5-year supply of land for housing as required in the National Planning Policy Framework. So this means, unless there's some disqualifying criteria applicable, that the tilted balance will be in effect, and we ought to give weight to granting permission for sustainable development. In terms of the green wedge, you'll see from the report that we've concluded that it doesn't comply with the green wedge policy. It will add to coalescence, Seaton and Colliford. Clearly, it's quite a visible site from certain areas and directions from across the valley particularly, so that effect will be apparent. Some appeals a few years ago, which I've noted in the report, do say we still can give weight to the green wedge policy. In terms of affordable housing, it's been proposed that the developer provides 25% affordable housing, which is what we would seek in this situation with the tilted balance in effect. If we deliver 72 houses on the site, that would deliver 18 affordable houses on the site. There's reference to a different figure in the conclusion summary, but it is 18 houses. That's the correct figure. Members will be aware we are short on delivering affordable houses in East Devon, and the affordability index indicates that housing is not particularly affordable in the district, and that does add some considerable weight to the balance in favour of granting planning permission. In terms of the access, there is no objection from the Highway Authority to the access. It is an access that the committee has resolved to grant approval for already under the previous application on the other side of the road. In terms of sustainability, the site is as close as it can be to the town centre. It's got reasonably good walking links with pavements down to the town, and there is a bus service that goes past the site as well on Harepath Road. In terms of landscape, the site is not designated in terms of being a national landscape, but nonetheless it is quite an exposed site, as you can see in the photograph. And there will be a change in character to the appearance and character of the site from undeveloped agricultural land to an urban housing development. In terms of heritage, there are some listed buildings. Near the junction of Harepath Road and Harepath Hill. I'm sorry, I don't think I've quite got them in the photographs down here. Roundabout in the location of where the football pitch is proposed to be delivered. Sorry, I'll just find the photo. Oh, so it's these properties here. There's a number of listed buildings, Home Farm I think it's called. there's no anticipated effects on heritage from the Conservation Officer. Obviously, reserve matters with yet to be determined on this site and the other sites being proposed by Baker Estates. That will need to be considered and factored into the design and layouts of any reserve matters application for the design of the estates to give an appropriate relationship to those buildings. You'll see that the county archaeologist has recommended some conditions relating to investigations on the site during development, but nothing in principle that is objectionable. In terms of residential amenity, obviously the site abuts Rowan Drive itself, an existing housing estate, and a few other houses on Harepath Road. And there are houses up and down Harepath Hill, which are set back from the site more than say Rowan Drive. I mean, again, layout and design is a reserve matter, so with careful design, it's anticipated a suitable relationship could be formed between the two sites, particularly given the likely generous amount of landscaping that's going to be required to accommodate ecology. So there's no objections to the proposal on that front. In terms of ecology or biodiversity, the site has been subject to habitat regulations assessments relating to the effects on the integrity of Beer Quarry Caves as a special area of conservation. We have had comments from Natural England confirming that they're satisfied that there will be no adverse effect or integrity of the site will be maintained, subject to mitigation being secured both through the planning conditions and through the legal agreement as well. And the recommendation been updated just to reflect receipt of those comments. In terms of on-site ecology, you see from the photographs that not a great deal, particularly about the site, that is of interest, other than perhaps the presence of the hedgerows, which bats use to navigate down towards the wetland area. There are extensive planning conditions proposed in terms of landscape and ecology management in the report. In terms of flood risk and sustainable drainage, the site's not in a flood zone. Devon County Council's, as a lead local flood authority, has advised that the application would be acceptable with the usual planning conditions to ensure the design of the SUDS features at reserve matters stage can account for the runoff. Obviously, we don't know at this stage what the runoff precisely will be, because that will be dependent on the layout that's yet to be agreed, but that will be subject to further consideration during the reserve matters application. The proposed development obviously does lead to a loss of agricultural land. I'm not sure if it's grade 3A or 3B, so we have to assume it is 3A. And that does weigh against the proposal. In terms of other matters, the NHS Trust has said that it doesn't need any contributions from the development towards healthcare in this instance. Sport England has advised that we do need to consider at a later point the relationship of the football pitch proposed on the other application to the houses on this application, and accordingly we've put a condition on requiring a ball strike study to be conducted just to make sure the layout is appropriate in relation to the football pitch, and try and avoid the need, if we can, of any ball fencing, because that obviously in itself would have potentially visual effects and possibly effects on wildlife as well. So taking all that into account, notwithstanding the fact that the proposal isn't in accordance with the existing local plan, nor does it neatly align with the policies under the emerging local plan, given the housing land supply position that we're in, given that the site is proposed to be developed under the emerging local plan for housing, it's considered that on balance that we ought to be recommending approval in this case, subject to obviously agreeing the habitat regulations assessment first, subject to the provision of 25% affordable housing, delivery of on-site public open space and future management, travel plan measures, monitoring fee, delivery of the SAC ecological mitigation, and a contribution towards secondary school transport as well. Members have just been handed an updated version of the report, which just updates some of the planning conditions, and I'll just briefly run through what those updates are. So the first two conditions, the reserved matters conditions, have had some phasing clauses added. That's just from a practical viewpoint to enable us to deal with some of the planning conditions as different phases are delivered. Condition 11 has had the pre-commencement clause added to the condition that concerns construction lighting, so we require agreement of those details before development commences. And likewise, condition 12, which deals with lighting design and lux contours, we've added a pre-commencement justification to the reason for that condition as well. Condition 14, we've added reference to policy EN14 to the reason for that policy. That's the pollution policy, because we do need to refer it to a policy in the local plan. Condition 15 on the agenda report, the construction management plan, that's been deleted because it was a repeated condition, and it now instead is the construction and ecological management plan condition. Condition 16, which is the habitat management monitoring plan, we've added an additional clause K, which is just concerning the agreement of any remedial measures needed. What was condition 17 on the agenda was a LEMP condition, landscape ecological management plan condition. That's been deleted as it duplicated some of the other conditions. It now becomes the soil survey condition, which was condition 18 in the agenda. Condition 18, which concerns the execution of landscaping works, we've now added a phasing clause to reflect the phasing proposed. And lastly, we are suggesting an additional condition, so that would be condition 21, if you will, requiring the submission of a phasing plan to be agreed with council, just to clarify how the site's going to be delivered in phases. So, subject to that, Chair, the application is recommended for approval as set out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, so we'll move on to. Sorry, Mike. Yeah.
There are, in those condition changes, and I've only skim read them, a number that have not been mentioned by our officers. Ones like item 6, where we have dropped out completely line or subcategory F, where evidence there is agreement in principle from the landowner, no building hereby permitted shall be occupied until the works have been approved and implemented in accordance with details A to F. And that is just one of a number of others that I've quickly been going through scribbling on, that there are amendments that have been made on this new report that have not been mentioned. And it's really hard also to keep on top when officers haven't mentioned us and told us all the changes that have been made on a piece of paper of several pages long, you know, at a moment's notice while we're talking about it. So we do need certainty about those changes, not just ad hoc. This is what the broad spectrum of changes made, because they're quite fundamental to the decision made.
Okay, do you want to go through those now? I imagine Jeremy knows which changes have been made.
Yeah. Can we adjourn 15 minutes
and let members just read the conditions, and then they can just let us know if they've got any concerns.
Okay. Do you think we should have public speakers first and then
No,
we'll
adjourn.
just adjourn now? Okay, so we'll just take a 15-minute adjournment so that members have time to read through the amended conditions and officers have time to just check which ones have been amended, and can go through those in detail. Actually, I'll just say now, Jeremy, condition 2, the second sentence appears incomplete unless I'm misreading it. Says, in seeking to discharge conditions on this planning commission, the details required in each condition may be submitted for approval to the local planning authority and discharged either for the development as a whole, and surely that should be or for part of it.
Sorry, which condition?
It's condition 2.
In the new report?
Yes, yeah. It appears to be incomplete. It would suggest, I would have thought, in whole or in part, but it doesn't say that. It just says either, and then it doesn't say what the or is. So 2:10, we'll reconvene, having read through the amended conditions. Compare and contrast. Okay, so hopefully we've had a chance. I haven't managed to get through all the conditions, but I can see quite a few of them have changed. I'm going to let Mrs. Ormsby explain why what we have online is different to the printed version that we've just had.
Good afternoon. So just a bit of an explanation and also an apology for any confusion and time taken. So the report that was published for the original meeting scheduled to take place 2 weeks ago was the correct report, and that is the report that has been circulated today. Somehow, so that everybody will have had sight of this same report in preparation for that meeting. When this revised agenda was published for this deferred meeting, and for reasons we haven't quite fathomed, an older draft version was published. So that's the confusion. So the correct one was originally the one in circulation. So hopefully will have been what people would have been reading when they were preparing to come and to speak at this meeting. The conditions that have changed, really, the key things is that phasing was introduced. So some of the conditions were tweaked to allow for phasing, for a phasing scheme to be introduced and for certain matters to be agreed per phase rather than for the whole development at one time. And then elsewhere, it was really conditions being tidied up, where there was a couple of duplications, where a few matters, for example, often in the things like the construction management plan, you might have an hours of use restriction, and then you might have it in the LEMP, and so we were just tidying things up and taking out things so you didn't have duplication within conditions. So there was nothing of substance. The point that Councillor Howe mentioned on condition 6, from the draft report being written and the final report being prepared, we received the final comments from the lead local flood authority. And as you'll see in the consultation response appended to the report, they recommended a final wording of the condition which didn't include point F. That's why the report that was then the finalised report didn't include point F. If members feel it's important to put it back in, it can do so. But that's the only reason for that element being removed. But I think the key point here is to say that there is nothing substantive that has changed in the conditions other than to allow some details to come forward on a phased basis. Thank you.
And so is that condition 2 in the version I've got just now? Because I still think there's an incomplete sentence in there.
Sorry, thank you for reminding me, Chair. So the last sentence should read, at the end it should be as a whole or for each phase.
Okay, so we can just bear that one in mind. That will form part of the conditions. Okay, so we'll move on to public speakers. We had Margaret Leppard down to speak, but I understand that Miriam Pavey is going to speak on her behalf. So if we can start with you, please, Miriam.
Councillors, I argue that with the use of outdated data in drainage design, with dependence on extensive off-site infrastructure, specifically a currently non-existent surface water sewer, underdeveloped culvert, and failing Seaton sewerage works, the Grampian condition should be applied to this Baker Estates application. There should be no development until all off-site infrastructure is in place. We already have empty and unfinished housing in the south of the town. Baker Estates drainage designers continue to use FEH13 data gathered up to 2005-2006 to model flow of surface water over specific site catchment topographies. Are Baker Estates not prepared to pay for industry standard FEH22 data that uses data collected from additional national locations and more recent daily data up to December 2020 and hourly data up to 2017? You must insist that FEH22 data is used to inform drainage design. Second, surface water flow from the site and the adjacent off-site football pitch will be managed by an on-site surface water sewer system that discharges into an attenuation basin adjacent to Harepath Road. The basin will in turn discharge via a flow control device into a long, yet to be constructed surface water sewer, routed under Harepath Road to discharge into the problematic ditch asset watercourse upstream of a yet to be upgraded culvert under Colliford Road into Marsh Lane area. The final outflow of this watercourse is not detailed. The on-site attenuation basin is the only device to reduce pollutants entering the precious wetlands. Third, foul sewer, including an inline pump on site, will be plugged into the existing barely coping Southwest Water foul sewer system. Seaton Sewerage Treatment Works already fails regularly with combined sewer outflows discharging into the River Axe. Councillors, please be very careful in your decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you just switch, or the next speaker can do it actually, if they just switch the microphone off and back on again. All right. Remotely controlled. Di Smith, I'm sorry you've had trouble getting through to Democratic Services this week. I didn't realise, but apparently there's been some problems with people trying to get through.
There are reasons why this application should not be approved, as you will have heard today. I would like to start with infrastructure. Vitally important, there needs to be sufficient infrastructure to support any development, and this needs to be in place before any construction work goes ahead. We have an old sewage system in Seaton that will come under severe pressure. Local schools which are full, which begs the question as to how far children will have to travel to fulfill their education. Flooding. There have been much more knowledgeable people than myself speaking here today on flooding issues. But I would say, as a Seaton resident, never has the flooding issue been more critical than recently. There is an existing proposed development of 130 houses in Harepath Road, which I believe is still awaiting approval, and this further proposal for 70 plus houses immediately opposite on Harepath Hill. Both of these proposed developments are a very serious issue for Seaton with regard to infrastructure and flooding. As has been seen in recent weeks, rainfall is increasing. Local roads and schools were seriously impacted. The A3052 was closed, along with many other local roads. The potholes have worsened, and there seems no visibility as to when this appalling situation will be resolved. Further flooding and added traffic will exacerbate this situation. I'd like to quote from Richard Ford. He sent me an email which said, broadly speaking, I am in favour of more homes as they are so desperately needed, but at the correct price point and on appropriate sites, building for profit with no real appreciation or action regarding infrastructure is clearly wrong. Flooding is a factor that must always be given serious consideration now. Despite this warning, developments are still being considered in Seaton. Our medical practices are under considerable pressure at the moment. This should be a priority when considering any sizable development in Seaton. Taking into account recent developments at the waterfront, 30 properties, Seaton Quay, 90 properties, and 72 houses in Colleton. The GP service position will be further exacerbated and will cause further disruption to an already considerably stretched health service. The developments that are already ongoing in Seaton should be taken seriously into consideration before any further developments are agreed. Also, the dentist situation is critical at the moment. Only private treatment is available. Where are these people going to get their dental treatment? There is also a threat to Seaton wetlands, the natural Seaton identity, including flooding. This is a very precious asset to Seaton when numbers of visitors have increased exponentially since it opened. And this site must be preserved at all costs. The proposed development would affect the foraging rare bats at the wetlands, impact on their migration to be quarry caves. The disruption caused both during and after development will have an enormous impact on the wildlife at this very important site. Given the extremely serious
Ask
flooding...
you to wind up now.
Sorry?
I need you to wind up. You've gone well over 3
Given the
minutes.
extremely serious flooding situation we've been experiencing, any decision for the potential 130 houses should be given very serious consideration, and the application for the 72 houses on Harepath Hill should not be given approval. I therefore completely oppose this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll hear from Graham Hutton from Baker Estates.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me okay? Good. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been almost exactly a year since I was here speaking to you about our other outline application for 130 homes on the other side of Harepath Road, which you resolved to approve. And we are desperately keen to get on with this, and hopefully that Section 106 will be finalised very shortly. As you might imagine, I have fairly similar things to say about today's application, given that it is also a draft allocation in your local plan, and the application is again supported by every statutory consultee, including this time the Town Council. We held our public exhibition back in July 2025, which was really well attended, not least by the majority of residents from our adjoining development at Rowan Drive, which abuts the site. And it was really heartening to hear their views, which reinforced our pride in the homes we've already completed in the town. We are a relatively small local developer, and for us, delivery is everything. We simply want to make progress, which is why the application before you works independently of any other approvals, including that on the other side of Harepath Road, so you can rely upon its delivery. However, the draft local plan does express a desire for the whole area to be master planned holistically, despite the land being in 2 separate allocations with different landowners. But clearly, we are the only people who will be able to do this, and I believe this application will work brilliantly alongside the sports pitch and everything else which has been approved. We requested the officers include the phasing conditions in their recommendation to help coordinate that a little further. The indicative master plan for the application shows just how low density the proposal is to reflect its position in the countryside. Nearly half of the land will be open space, which is massively in excess of that required by policy. But this is to ensure there is plenty of space for SUDS drainage systems in the design at reserve matters stage, and also to provide for the important protected species such as bats and dormice. The Seaton community have suffered from flooding in the past and are understandably vigilant when it comes to new development. I've spoken on this at length previously and would again be happy to answer questions, but I would reiterate that the details of drainage for the site are covered by Planning Condition 6 in the recommendation, and they must come forward either before or with the reserve matters design. The space available on the site to deliver the necessary SUDs is, however, not in doubt, and the lead local flood authority agrees. So we have a proposal that has been fully evidenced to comply with everything the statutory consultees could throw at us. It's in a sustainable location on land allocated in the local plan process, and it comes with the blessing of the Town Council, the support of the officers, and from a developer with a track record for delivering responsibility in the town. Therefore, I, and I suspect all of the 167 families on the affordable home waiting list, urge you to support the principle of the development today by voting to approve. It will responsibly deliver critically needed housing of all tenures. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions when you wish. Thank you.
Thank you. We also, now, is this the one where we do have a statement from Marcus Hartnell? Yes, right. I think I put earlier that he hadn't sent a statement for this one, but I got the wrong one. Okay, so this is from Councillor Marcus Hartnell, who is the ward member.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, councillors. Okay, so the comments from Councillor Hartnell are as follows. I am supportive of this application. The site is significant in that it will form part of the wider scheme of development to the north of Seaton, specifically along the site SEAT 05, already approved subject to 106 agreements, and the commercial employment application currently being considered from M&S and the Range. Combined, this makes it a sustainable location for growth rather than isolated development. There is a clear and pressing need for housing in the district, particularly affordable housing in Seaton. Currently, around 167 households are registered on the local housing list, and this development would provide 21 affordable homes. Baker Estates have a good track record of delivering affordable homes in Seaton at Gardeners Meadow and Gosling Walk. 21 new affordable homes is a meaningful contribution for local families and younger residents who may otherwise struggle to remain in the area as a town, Seaton cannot afford to allow young working families to be priced out. They are our builders, electricians, shop workers and carers. I welcome the intention to retain existing hedgerows, providing landscape and include open space, which will help soften the visual impact and protect biodiversity. In addition, the development would bring wider economic and community benefits through local spending and infrastructure contributions. Devon County Council's flood risk and SUDS team have confirmed that they have no in-principle objections subject to planning conditions which are set out in the officer's recommendation. This provides reassurance that drainage and flood risk issues have been properly considered. I recognise that there are a number of objections to this application which I have considered and recognise those concerns are important. However, on balance, I believe the benefits, particularly the delivery of much needed affordable housing in a sustainable location alongside appropriate environmental and technical mitigation, outweigh the negatives. For these reasons, I respectfully support the application and ask the committee to consider approving it. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, questions? Councillor Smith.
I think I'd just like to start with just a kind of correction. I think I'm looking at the only reference I can find from Seaton Town Council in the report. I think it's important to note that rather than being supportive or give blessing to, which was referenced there, all they have stated is they could not find any valid planning reasons to object, which is very different. And I just wanted to make a reference to that because I think that's important to distinguish. My question is for Jeremy. I know that the Football Foundation and Devon FA, I'm saying this as a sports champion for East Devon, have concerns about the boundaries currently eating into the sporting area that was designated before. Has that been addressed? The concerns for brought up by the Football Foundation, and I've got a separate question about the actual. Do we have anywhere marked about the actual gradient of the site, because it is significant, and I think it's a big factor in this as well.
Chair, I think the sites are distinct. They do share the, do you mean where the access is coming in? Because that is the same access as was resolved to be approved under the other application. So is that the overlap area that you're referring to? Because I believe it's otherwise the same as, it should follow neatly the red line from the other one, other than for the access.
I'm only referencing it because obviously the Football Foundation and Devon FA have referenced it. I imagine they are concerned that perhaps the boundary line between this application and the area previously designated for the sports. I think they reference the whole complex, the whole sporting complex, including parking in the pavilion and.
Yes, it is the area, if I highlight here, where the access comes in, where the overlap is, and that's been taken into account in Section 106 negotiations to make sure that one doesn't hold up the other, if you see what I mean. And sorry, I can't recall your second question now. The gradient. Well, obviously the application is in outline form and reserve matters need to be submitted. Naturally, the site, if I get back to the topography plan, and indeed photographs, it does show it is sloping, as you say, and it will need to be, a level will need to be cut for the pitch, and we expect those details to be submitted for consideration as part of the reserve matters application.
To answer your question, Simon. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Levine.
Thank you, Chair. I refer to the Devon County Council Education Department comment, and I gather from it that each dwelling will need to house 28.8 children. Will the house be spacious enough, and will we need to provide financial support for the parents to be able to provide for the children? Thank you.
Funnily enough, I just spotted that one, yes. I think it was an error when Devon County Council Education responded. They said it would generate 18 primary school pupils and 10.8 secondary school pupils. And then unfortunately they put per dwelling, hence 28 children per dwelling. I was just trying to work out the maths of that, 72 times 20. Yeah. I think a little per dwelling slipped in there, whereas it should have said the whole development will generate that. But yes, well spotted. Councillor Barlow. Ian.
Thank you. I just wonder if the officer could assure us there are no issues with the sewage treatment plants in Seaton, as per the previous one we were talked about, where we are looking for assurances that there will be, and what was talked about by the public, the Grampian order was put on it, that is not necessary in this case.
Who's going to?
I just couldn't see any conditions on sewage at all on this one.
No, I've just been going through them looking for sewage as well. To coin a phrase, yes. So yeah, there isn't actually a condition about even connection. So I think South West Water had indicated there was a connection available.
Yes, the South West Water's comment in this case is that they are able to provide a foul sewage connection to this site and that there is adequate capacity. The water cycle study shows that Seaton has, I think, 10% headroom as standing at the moment. I think it notes that in total, with all of the development coming forward in the local plan, it would slightly exceed its headroom. But I'm taking the combination of water cycle study and South West Water's comments to mean there is adequate headroom to accommodate this development.
And should we take into account all the other ones that we've put forward when we do that? Because much as you keep getting asked, yes, there's room for this one, as long as we don't take into account any of the others.
Well, they should have, well, they will have done in terms of their comment on this application, taking account of obviously we've granted consent for the other Harepath Road development, so they'll be keeping track of that. But there are other allocations in Seaton that haven't yet come forward through the application process to come into that. So I'm assuming It's those that will lead to the point at which it might be exceeded and we might need a condition. But we're not there yet.
And we don't know of any improvements being done to the Seaton Works at present time.
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm in ongoing discussions with South West Water to understand their programme of improvements and how that aligns with our housing trajectories for the sites coming forward in the local plan to try and ensure that they align, and we can reassure members that that's the case by the time the plan is submitted for examination.
Thank you.
Anybody would think you didn't trust South West Water.
I'm one of the few people that do, but I'm probably in the wrong.
Okay. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to share those views on the sewage as well. And I'm also concerned that the 10% headroom, is that only this site? I know we're told to take each planning application in its own merit, but combined with the other ones, is that 10% for this site or for all of them altogether?
I think Ed was saying it is all of them, but
Yes, that's for all of them. That's total capacity of the sewage treatment works.
Do we know, sorry to go on this point, Chair, but do we know how many houses we have in Seaton and what 10% is and how many we've added? So are we actually using up 10% yet or not? I had it down that there are approximately 7,700 houses at the present time in Seaton. So in which case it'd be 770, in which case we've got plenty of room. But I just wondered if that was true.
Through your share, I don't have the figures in front of me, but those sound about right. So yes, my understanding is that this is within the 10% headroom.
I would hope it's not just a raw calculation like that anyway. You know, there's so many houses in Seaton. And yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that sounds a good rule of thumb. Okay, do we have any further questions? Sorry, Simon again, yeah.
It might be, I'll start with Jeremy, it might then come to the agent, but the reference by a public speaker about up-to-date data, is there, could you just clarify that for me? Has the most up-to-date data been used, especially with water?
That was to do with surface water, presumably.
Chair, I don't sorry, I don't have any knowledge if the developers use up-to-date data or what data Devon County Council is using, but Devon County Council as a lead local flood authority will have looked at the details submitted and will be using the most up-to-date information available to it to provide its response to us. I don't know what that actually is, if it accords with what the speaker was talking about or not, but we have to rely on the advice given to us by the County Council.
I made a mistake. It was 7,700 population, 3,500 homes. So it's 350, which is where my 10%, I was a little bit concerned we're getting closer to that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm sorry we can't take interventions from members of the public. Okay, so moving on then. Do we have any further questions? No? Okay, in that case, we can go into debate. Who'd like to start us off? Ian.
I will, Chair. Yeah, I know. I sympathise with everyone. Everyone says they're not NIMBYs. We're all NIMBYs as far as I'm concerned. We all protect our area because we know our area and we know the issues that we have in our area. However, as has been said before today, all the experts tell us that this site is deliverable. There are many issues that we question, but again, we can't question experts unless we have experts to fight against them. So, you know, on what grounds? A bit like Seaton Town Council, you know, they may not love it, but at the end of the day, they can't find any reason to object to it. It's in our local plan, our upcoming Section 19 local plan. You know, are we saying that isn't a sound plan already? You know, to me, if it's in that plan, we're protecting this area to say that if any applications come through that aren't in that plan, at least we can say, well, you know, we are supporting the plan. There are the numbers are correct. As we've said before, the only way you're going to stop this is to not build houses, and therefore we don't need as many people. So unless you've got a way of halving the population of Seaton, we are going to need more houses. So when you're ready, if you're ready, I will be happy to propose this. Again, I would like to add in that we should put 110 litres per bedroom. I don't know why we don't just put it on from the start, because everyone you put in front of me, I will insist on it. And I know everyone laughs and thinks it's a pathetic thing, but as I said, the more we can take out of the system before it gets into the problem, that's got to be better. And the more we do it on each individual house has got to be better than relying on SUDs further down the road that can silt up and all the rest of it. It's just common sense to me. So the public may not like it, but this is our job, and that is why I'm proposing it. Thank you.
Okay, have we got a seconder? Councillor Howe.
Oh, I'm halfway on seconding. I need to clarify my position. Because I need to come back to the water cycle report that isn't mentioned in this report. Mr. Freeman has quite moderately said Seaton has a 10% capacity, has a less than 10% capacity. It is between 0 and 10% capacity. The same water cycle report, though, says our total development for Seaton is 284 expected in the local plan, some of which we've consented, some is due to be consented, and we've got this one in front of us. If we consent all of them, there is a minus figure, which turns it into red, of 133 metres squared day lack of capacity at Seaton. That is my understanding. So I'm beginning to think we need a Grampian condition to make sure that is covered. Now, I'd love Mr. Freeman, who is the expert on this, to tell me I'm nuts and wrong, but the water cycle report being such a long and detailed thing, it's all over the place, if you get my meaning. So I would like clarity on that, but otherwise I'm happy to support.
Through you, Chair, I mean, I agree with Councillor Howe's assessment of the water cycle study. As I said, there is, sorry, you're right, it is up to 10% capacity at the moment. That capacity will be exceeded through the total of development through the new local plan, as I said. As to what point at which that's exceeded, I don't fully understand. As you say, the figures are in cubic litres rather than, cubic metres, in fact, of capacity rather than the number of homes or number of dwellings. I think the conclusions for the Seaton wastewater treatment works are largely agreed with South West Water. They don't agree in some cases, but I think they largely agreed in this case. So my assumption is that because they're not objecting to this application and not sought a Grampian condition, that this can be accommodated within that up to 10% capacity. But obviously that will be exceeded at some point, and at some point some improvements will be needed, and we may need some Grampian conditions, but I'm confident they would have asked for it in this case if it was necessary. And I think that is backed up by the information we've got in the water cycle study.
Can we recommend then, Chair, that we do similar to the one we did previously, where we improve the output of the houses and make that a condition of the houses, that they can only put G2, I think it was the condition, 110 litres on the houses, to at least, again, limit the amount of sewage and water that is going down there in the first place. I know sewage is slightly different, but again, it's all tied in with the same thing. The amount of water that goes down the sewage, which is why they do it in metres and not people, so that it's actually a litres goes in, same should come out, you'd think.
So you're saying you'd like an extra condition?
I think it's just strengthening the condition. I think it's on the water usage. It was the last one we mentioned. It had gone up. South West Water recommended that we use the G2 system, which is an upgraded on the developer, a higher level that they have to put in that limits the amount of water and basically makes the house uses grey water and things like that. So it helps with all of it. And again, I think from a planning point of view, we should be doing that on all houses in the future anyway.
So is that a target, 110 litres? Yeah, it's not presumably, once you reach 110 litres, the water to your house stops coming.
No, it's the design of the house that basically the design is made so that the house is more efficient, i.e.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was hoping I was understanding that correctly, yeah. Ed, do you want to?
So if I understand correctly, it's effectively the water efficiency details that were required on the Fenniston scheme that was considered this morning, with the addition of the requirement of the water butts that Councillor Barlow requested on that application. So we see no problem with adding a similar requirement to this application. If members are so minded, if it could leave the detailed wording delegated to us so we can make sure it's applicable in this case, but the principle is sound.
And can we have some sort of guarantee from the officers that when do we know we're getting to this 10%? I mean, Mike has a fair point, doesn't he? At what point do? We just keep passing them? As long as South West Water say yes, it's a bit like the last one. Unless we have an expert questioning it, we just accept it. And I think there comes a point, well, I want you to say, at what point are you going to say, yeah, we need a Grampian on this? Another 50? Another 100? You know, this I think is the question that needs answering. Otherwise we're stacking them up, but each one, because they hasn't been delivered, we're still all right.
Well, through the discussions I'm having with South West Water, I'd like to get to a position where we have a trajectory for our housing coming forward, a trajectory for their investment in the system, and we can align them so that we don't need Grampian conditions necessarily, because we know that the improvements are coming forward in sync with our housing coming forward, such that there will be capacity when it's required. So that's part of the ongoing discussions with South West Water, and through that process, at least if we can't agree a position whereby it is coming forward as needed, we at least understand points like that. At what point is it going to be exceeded? At what point, in terms of number of homes in each location, do we need to start imposing Grampian conditions? So that's part of the further ongoing discussions with South West Water. But I don't have the answers today, but we have got the answers in terms of this particular application, which I would suggest is what's needed for today's decision.
But we don't know how many houses we've already built or done. And look, I think it's a fair comment. And yeah, I'd like to know, I'd like to be a billionaire, but it's not like to happen just because I'd like something to happen. You know, you've got to have a plan of at what point. You know how many houses we've allocated now. You know vaguely what this 10% is, even if you take, someone must know what the average sewage is per bedroom, per person coming out as a metre. So at what point do we get to that up to 10%, up to a maximum, not 10%, as you said, up to a maximum 10%, and at what point do we go over that?
Yeah, I think we're kind of labouring the point here, but I'll Mrs. Ormsby, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, just to further that. So in recent discussions that we've been having with South West Water about other areas where there are already identified pressures, for example, around Woodbury, etc. I think South West Water have given officers confidence that they have their programme of works, which is informed by our allocations, our existing allocations, our emerging allocations. They're looking at that. They take note of what consents have been granted, and they factor that into their future planning of what is going to be required. And I think that's what's led them to more recently starting to request Grampian conditions on sites where they recognise that there are going to be some capacity issues. So as a consequence of that, from the office perspective, where they're not asking for it, we're taking the view that that's because they don't, not that they're not thinking about it, but they don't think it's necessary in this situation, because they clearly are thinking and have taken a much more proactive response. I think, clearly previously we were a bit dissatisfied with the extent and detailed responses we're getting from South West Water, and I do believe that they have improved and are giving, I think, more confidence that they are looking at everything more holistically, and hence the recommendations that we're getting.
Then I feel much more reassured, thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Unfortunately, I feel less so. And I'll explain my reasoning behind that, and thank you for that explanation. But the trouble is, South West Water has come to the table because they've messed up. They've been forced to by public opinion, constant sewage overflows, and the inability to deliver what they should have delivered years ago. Exmouth being a classic example. They've known our allocation in our last local plan for the last 10 plus years. They did nothing about it. And this is the eternal problem. They are now concentrating on the areas where there are real issues and ignoring the ones that aren't quite yet overflowing as badly as those other sites, but will do if we carry on allocating housing into these. Well, we've got to allocate the housing, that's a different question. But if we don't force them to put what they need to in, and that's the fundamental issue. And I'm sitting here, and the 10% is a real great. It could be 1%, and this is the issue. It could only be 1% capacity at that site. We don't fully know. And if it's 1%, we're going to be over straight away. If it's 9%, then possibly we might get away with it. But going back to the original thing, if we deliver 284 homes over this planned period, since this report was done over a year ago, and that includes applications and everything else, we will take it over the limit by 133 metres squared per day. And that's the fundamental issue. So where are we with current applications granted in Seaton and ones subject to be granted or even at appeal? Because what's the cumulative of that? And if it takes us close, we've got to seriously consider what we're doing. And that's my issue. They haven't asked for a Grampian condition, but we're the gatekeeper to a certain extent. We've got to take the expert advice, yes, but when we know they're wrong, and at present we have a report that shows they're wrong, even though they disagree with it for obvious reasons, we've got to be careful. And I think at present, the Grampian condition asking for that relevant data to prove there is capacity would be acceptable. But at present, leaving it open, wide open to, well, it's all about phasing and which site comes first. And, you know, we might grant them in an order, but the one last might be the one that gets built first and all the rest of it. And of course, then the first one you granted with no Grampian condition tips it well over the top. We've got to be careful. So, as I say, I'm cautionary, you know, and I just want to make sure we've got this tied up as best we can because we know the issues with South West Water. And I'm glad they are working with us better, but they've got a long way to go still.
Could we ask for anything other than a Grampian condition, Chair? Could we ask for a condition that insists that officers are confident that the sewage is deliverable, that we are not at the percentages we're talking about, rather, because I think a Grampian can only be issued if the works is planned, and if it isn't planned from South West Water, we can't do a Grampian condition. Is that correct, or am I?
Through you, Chair, can I make a suggestion to the committee on this
Please do,
point?
Ed.
Because I would be nervous about a resolution that includes a Grampian condition based on what the information we have today to demonstrate that that's reasonable and necessary and meets the tests. However, I do understand members' concerns, and basically what you're wanting, as I understand it, is South West Water to demonstrate to us that there is adequate capacity. So if members are minded to grant permission, I would suggest that it includes delegated authority to officers to seek the views of South West Water and evidence their position. And in the absence of sufficient evidence, by the time we come to issue the permission, bearing in mind there's a Section 106 agreement to be drafted and resolved, so we've got a few months to work with them to understand the position. In the event that we don't reach that resolution, then a Grampian condition be imposed.
Yeah, but I think, you know, I'm puzzled by this sort of rather vague amount of headroom, because I'd have thought it's a simple calculation. How much are you processing every day, or on average, and what is the capacity of the plant? And you can kind of work it out from that. But no, it's going to be a lot more complicated than that. Which I think is why the report took about a year to come to a conclusion. Anyway,
Steve was first.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Steve.
I don't think
Councillor
you saw me
Hunt.
earlier. Yeah. I fully support the preceding comments about this headroom. I'm really very uncertain about it, but I would also be satisfied with your suggestion there that delegated authority be given to officers to make sure that everything is in place. But I think quite apart from the actual numbers here, what we've got to remember is what will be damaged, you know, if we do really go over the top with the sewage treatment plant, because we're talking about damage to the wetlands, and that is the jewel in the crown of Seaton, and we just really can't afford to get this wrong. So I hope that the condition added by the officers just now will be strong enough to make sure that we can protect that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Young, portfolio holder for environment, among many other things, would like to comment.
Yeah, if I just can come in, there is an equation you can work out per house, which is times 0.232, which gives the cubic capacity for dry weather flow. So it's very easy to do that. That's fairly conservative with a little c, that is. The league table on sewage spills, Seaton is 4th worst. It's worse than Fennerton on the number of spills. So that gives a significance. And when you talk about headroom, that is dry weather headroom, you only need today, and it would be over that capacity, and it would be spilling.
Yeah, we know all about it in Exmouth, yeah. One shower of rain and all of a sudden nobody can swim in the sea. Okay, yes, Councillor Levine, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add a note of frustration and to add to my rant of this morning. Every planning application we're getting now, the residents come with exactly the same problems, and I sympathize with them. They are right. We're discussing sewage, we're discussing the same problem over and over and over again. It's not just Seaton and it's not just Fennerton, it's the whole of East Devon which is suffering. And we really need to do something with sewage with South West Water, and we need to do something with Devon Highways, because we're all suffering.
I think South West Water are getting it in the neck from everybody at the moment, and I think somewhat belatedly, by about 50 years, they've decided maybe it's time to make some investment, at which point they discover they haven't got any money. But yes, not just South West Water, no, they're all the same. Okay, do we have any more speakers? Okay, in that case, with that recommendation in mind, we first need to, now there is a shadow habitat regulations assessment, which I believe the resolution or the recommendation is to adopt it as our appropriate assessment. This has been provided by the developers who've done this at their expense, I think. Have we had the Natural England response on this, and they were happy with the shadow HRA?
Yes, we have, and they are happy with it.
So in that case, we can adopt it. Yeah. So firstly, we need to adopt the shadow habitat regulations assessment. So all those in favour? Okay, and that I think is unanimous.
7, 8, 9, yeah,
Yep.
unanimous.
And then we have a resolution to approve with conditions to be secured by Section 106 legal agreement on, that will be on housing and affordable housing and so on. I think even the access is reserved on, no? Access is to be approved, it said. I wasn't quite sure what they meant by that, whether we had to approve it today or whether...
Can I just suggest that
Yeah.
we just get, because it's Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say it's the recommendation to approve subject to conditions as amended. So I think it's worthwhile Mrs Ormsby or Mr Freeman just clarifying what those are and subject to the Section 106 agreement with the heads of terms listed in the report. So could we just perhaps go to either Mrs Ormsby or Mr Freeman just to clarify what exactly the conditions are so members know what they're voting on? Thank you.
So it's the conditions as set out in the report circulated to members today, plus the amendment to condition 2 to add the words for each phase at the end of it, a further condition as set out by Mr Ebden requiring a phasing plan to be agreed, a further additional condition as suggested by Councillor Barlow regarding a water conservation strategy to be agreed, and specifically that should include the provision of water butts providing a 110 litre capacity per bedroom, and that the resolution is subject to officers seeking views from South West Water to evidence capacity to deal with sewage arising from the development. And if South West Water can't evidence capacity, then there is delegated authority to officers to add a Grampian-style condition to require details of how sewage will be dealt with prior to the decision being issued, and then subject to the heads of terms set out in the officer report and all other conditions as set out.
Okay, everyone clear what they're voting on? Okay, in that case, all in favour? Against?
Sorry, Chair, you're a bit too quick for me. Can I just count again, please?
I think it was...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favour.
Okay, I'm abstaining
Any
just
against?
to... I don't think there were.
Simon's
actually.
abstaining.
You're
And then
abstaining as
how
well,
many
Simon.
abstentions? Just two of you?
Two.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Okay. Right. Switch myself off. Brings us on to agenda item 13, application 252165 FUL, Ware Farm Manor, Ware Lyme Regis. And that's pages 319 to 328 in the agenda pack.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have 2 minutes just to change over presenters, so have a breather or stand up and sit down again for 2 minutes.
You ask him to take that off the screen for now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Andrew.
yeah, can we? I'll just say, as they retreat, thank you to everybody who attended, and I wish you a safe journey home. Okay, how do we calculate it, Jeff? Okay, are we good to go, Andrew? Okay. So this is agenda item 13, application 252165 FUL, Ware Farm Manor, Ware Lyme Regis, 319 to 328 in your agenda pack, and Andrew Digby is going to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application is for a retrospective application for installation of a stable door on a listed building in the curtilage of Ware Farm Manor near Lyme Regis. Listed building consent has already been granted for these works, so we're just considering the planning application today. The building in question is outlined in red there, and the curtilage of Ware Farm Manor in blue. The pink highlights that the building is Grade 2 listed, but the listing extends to the curtilage outbuildings as well. The buildings to the west were part of the farm holding some time ago, but they're now independent residences. And on the next plan, we'll see that the building is, there we go, right on the boundary with the two properties. This drawing is labelled as existing, but it's as it was. The work's already taken place, so the next one shows the changes. And if I flick between them, you can just see the door being added. Apart from the door, there are some anti-chew bars added to the door and some of the internal works, which you'll see in the photos. But this is the extent of the application. It's principally just the addition of a door. Looking at the floor plan, you can see the door being added if I flick between them, and a slight change to the internal layout. So this is the door, the one on the right, matching the one on the left, and the internal layout. That's the back of the building, looking in the direction of the neighbouring property, which is one of these buildings over the boundary wall there. And this is looking from the neighbour back to the stable building, and so there's that window that we saw there. And the boundary between the two properties is down here, so this is the building we're looking at, and this is the neighbour's house. As I said before, the application for listed building consent has already been granted, so in heritage terms, this is acceptable. Heritage is the main planning issue here. We consider that the proposed alterations, or sorry, the alterations that have already taken place that we're being asked to approve, are acceptable in heritage terms and there are no disbenefits, so we're recommending approval with only one condition, that the development takes place in accordance with the approved plans. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that was short and sweet. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Yes, Ian, you know the routine. Ex-councillor Ian Thomas, so he knows this chamber well.
Never been here before in my life, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair and members. Officers have scoped this application narrowly to physical works, with impacts arising from use said to fall outside its scope. Our concern is not the door in isolation, but the consequences of that approach. There's a documented history of nighttime disturbance associated with stabling at the western end of the milking parlour, immediately adjacent to our home. Environmental Health progressed an investigation based on repeated disturbance. 28 recordings were made in our son's bedroom using the council's own reporting app, in direct line with the unauthorised door opening immediately adjacent to our shared boundary. The case was closed only because horses were removed from the milking parlour when the application was submitted, not because the complaint lacked substance. This investigation was well advanced and moving towards consideration of formal action, rather than at an initial or speculative stage. The impacts are therefore real, immediate, and evidenced. The officer report concludes that there is no evidence of impact from the unauthorised door itself. That conclusion again follows from the exclusion of use-related impacts, not from an absence of recorded evidence. Several other material planning concerns are identified, including amenity impact, noise, intensity of equine activity, the lawful planning status of the use, the lawful planning status of use, and policy compliance, all supported by detailed evidence in the application file. They are not dismissed because they lack substance, but are not assessed because the report scope is deliberately restricted to physical works. This means that members are being asked to determine the application without the benefit of a full assessment of matters the report itself identifies as material. Although use impacts are excluded, the report relies on equine welfare and use to demonstrate public benefit through references relating to the viable use of the building. This means public benefit is asserted while impacts associated with that same use are excluded from consideration. Assumptions underpinning the benefit are therefore untested, creating an obvious imbalance. If members accept the report's narrow scope, approval today risks an unconditioned, unresolved and potentially unlawful equine use immediately adjacent to neighbouring dwelling, with no planning framework to manage hours, intensity or amenity. We're not asking members to decide the lawfulness of use today, rather in the sustainable solution for both the applicant and the neighbouring residents, we question whether it's procedurally safe to approve works that physically support a disputed use without requiring that use to be properly assessed through the change of use process first. We therefore ask members to refuse or defer this application pending completion of that assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do have another speaker. So the agent, Sebastian Cope.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application at Ware Farm Manor. It's a retrospective application for very minor physical works. The reinstatement of one stable door on the north elevation and the retention of galvanised anti-tube bars and linings to existing stable doors. The officer report recommends approval with no conditions. It's important to be clear about what this application does and does not seek to do. The application does not propose any change of use. It relates solely to small-scale operational works to a curtilage-listed stable block. Works that arose during previously approved repairs in 2013. Listed building consent for these works has already been granted, confirming they are acceptable in heritage terms. The Conservation Officer, the Council's Statutory Heritage Advisor, confirms that the works cause only minor and reversible, less than substantial harm. They preserve the significance of the listed building and its setting, and in some respects, particularly the reinstated stable door, they improve the legibility of the building's historic function. The heritage evidence submitted shows clearly that this building is historically a stable, not a milking parlour, as has sometimes been suggested. Historic mapping and aerial photography identify it as a 4-stall stable with loft, and the internal layout approved in 2013 already reflected this use. The reinstated door simply returns an existing opening to its traditional purpose. The anti-tube bars and linings are protective measures. Whilst visually apparent, they are fully reversible, do not remove historic fabric, and are specifically intended to protect original timber doors from long-term damage, which the Conservation Officer accepts as a public benefit in heritage terms. Members will be aware that neighbour concerns have been raised, particularly regarding noise and equestrian activity. These concerns are acknowledged and understood. However, as the officer report makes clear, they relate to how the building may be used, not the physical works before you today. Planning law requires this application to be determined on the development proposed, and there's no evidence that the reinstated door or the door linings themselves cause harm to the residential amenity. Environmental Health has confirmed that the previous noise complaint is closed, and crucially, there is no mechanism within this new application to regulate or intensify use, nor does approval of these minor works grant any new rights in that respect. In summary, the proposals concern minor reversible alterations only. It's supported by the Conservation Officer. It complies with local and national heritage policy, and there's no demonstrable harm arising from the works themselves. So for these reasons, and in line with the Officer's recommendation, I respectfully ask the members to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just push the button there?
Sorry.
I think we actually got 2 speakers into one counter there, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Ward member, Councillor Susan Westerman. You can speak from there, Susan, if it's easier. So long as the mic's working, and if you want to log... No, well, if you hold your card next to it, should then... You need to press the button.
Need to do that now, don't I? Chair, members, in previous applications, this building that is the subject of this application has been referred to as South Barn in the 4 applications submitted in 2002, outbuilding in the original 2013 application, and a milking parlour in the current one. I will be referring to the building as South Barn to avoid confusion. Firstly, there is no wish to stop the owners of Ware Farm Manor on their visits to their property from enjoying the horses they bring with them. The issue is the siting of the accommodation of the horses within the South Barn during this time, and minimising the effect this has on their neighbours. The applicant's letter submitted in this application includes an aerial view photograph showing a mock-up of Ware Farm from the 1910 census. The working farm was pastoral, and the South Barn included a fowl house, pig houses, stables, calf houses, in fact, accommodation for a variety of farm animals. In the original 2013 application, the existing combined plans shows the west end of the South Barn as a shippen, or as I now know, a cattle barn. And in the Savills report, in the applicant's letter, this showed this part of the barn as a loose box, confirming the area as an enclosed and covered stall in which an animal or animals can be confined. I therefore respectfully disagree with Mr. Cocker in his email, page 3 of the applicant's letter to Mrs. Bozer, on his assertion that the use of the south barn has always been a stable. Mr. Cocker noted in his email that the doors in the south barn should have been wooden, and therefore contravenes the original planning application. Mr. Cocker also mentions the west elevation, which is the elevation between the two boundaries. There is no mention of any change to this elevation within the application. The west elevation originally had a door at high level within an opening and is now a slatted opening as shown in the photograph of the full letter from Ian and Sue Thomas, page 9, section 8.4.2 of this application. The slatted opening that is now there amplifies the noise, worsens the smells, and attracts flies directly and adversely affecting the neighbour's environment. The muck heap has been sited close to the boundary. In the summer of 2024, the conditions were so bad for the visitors staying at Ware Barn Cottage, a holiday let, that monies were returned and further lettings were cancelled. There has been no consideration on the effect of the sighting of the horses would have to the neighbours living in Ware Barn. In the well, you saw in there how close the that barn is to the letting barn on the other side of the neighbour's barn. I agree that this application is about the fabric of the building that has been changed, contravening a condition of the original application. The window to a door that is 1 metre from the boundary. There is also a change of the doors from wood to wood and metal, and the change in the west elevation. I recommend that this application is refused and a new application is made covering all 3 divergences from the original application. As the barn over the years has been used to accommodate different types of farm animals, I recommend a change of use application to stables is submitted where a full assessment can be made. By calling a part of an area within an application, as in 2013, by a descriptive name, shouldn't automatically mean a change of use is bypassed. If EDDC does not require a change of use, I think a dangerous precedent could be set. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westerman. Officers, would you like to come back on some of these points that have been made about the scope of the report and the items we're considering here and why we're not considering the usage to which this has been put? And could you also comment on whether it would or should have had a change of use application?
We also ask, is it allowed to put cows in?
Well, let's deal with the... yeah, I'm suspecting that if it was okay to house animals, that it's not specified which animals. therefore a change of use wasn't required.
So in 2013, when the various conversion works were permitted at the site, this outbuilding was included in the plans, and you can see there the proposed floor plans for the building, which included, so from left to right, a store, a stable, a fodder store, a stable, and a stable. And then if we go to the proposed plans, you can see, I can't read that, so we've got store, stable, fodder store, stable, stable. So aside, so I mean, just from, I suppose, from the basis that the officer view is in 2013, clearly this building or part of the building was approved as a stable or indicated to be in use as a stable, and that part of the building where the change is proposed to go from a window to a door was shown as a stable. So the officer view is that, I mean, aside from the fact it's not part of the application, it actually represents or reflects the use that was previously approved at the site. In terms of the application before it is purely for the physical alterations to the building, and in terms of the planning application, the key thing being the external alteration. Internal alterations themselves not normally requiring planning permission, but in this instance, it's building consent, which has been granted. So it's the change of that window to a door that members are being asked to consider. Now, there may be cases where an external alteration may result in the way in something is used. For example, putting a balcony railing around a raised, on a flat roof, effectively creates a balcony. And so you might take that into consideration. So I'm not saying that it's never relevant to consider whether physical alterations might lead to other impacts. But in this case, the officer report focuses purely on those physical changes because the officer view is that there will be no resulting material change of use as a consequence in any event. So for that reason, the use of the building is not mentioned in the description because it isn't relevant, and the only thing that is relevant consideration today are is that external alteration to the building, which is the insertion, change of a window to a door, and the installation of the anti-tube bars around it. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions for officers? Ian,
should we be willing to pass this? Are we allowed, could it be a condition that rubber mats must be put inside the stables, or is that not within our power? It's just that I know from previous experience of stables I've had that rubber mats are put down as a standard thing for horses. It's supposed to be better for the horses, but the video we were sent showed a horse banging on the concrete floor, tapping its foot because it's bored, and at the end of the day, if they do it on a rubber mat, it doesn't make as much noise.
Because that part of the building is indicated as already having been shown as being proposed for use as a stable, these alterations are not going to change that. I don't think it would be reasonable to do that, although obviously there was a noise complaint, and if there was a noise issue did arise again, then that may be a solution that the owner of the building might want to consider to avoid such a noise complaint coming through. And obviously, statutory noise complaint being one way of dealing with any problems that might arise.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to make a suggestion when a motion when you're ready.
I know what you mean. Is there any indication that changing the window to a door has made the noise issue any worse? Has that been a representation at any point?
None that I'm aware of, no.
Oh, okay. So in terms of changing the window to a door, we can't say that it's it's made the noise more audible or apparent or anything. Okay. In that case then, unless there are other speakers wishing to speak, Ian, would you like to make your...
Recommended as per officer approval. Thank you.
Okay.
Clarification, one thing. It says here that
Yeah.
it's subject to no conditions, but then there is one condition just saying that they've got to follow the approved plan. So I just want to just confirm that.
Yes, I think Jeremy did say there was one condition that it was done in accordance with the approved plans. Yeah. And do we have a seconder then?
Yeah, we'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Wragg. So that's seconded by Councillor Wragg. So all those in favour? I don't think we've got...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And against, and abstentions, 2.
It's all still adding up, it's all good.
Yeah. So that one is carried. We'll move on then to our last one of the day, which is 251601 OUT car park land south of Underhill Hill. Seaton, it says. That should be Limpston, shouldn't it?
Yes, it is, look. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Limpston,
I'm
Underhill
sorry,
Close.
I'm reading from the chair's script.
Underhill
which-
Close, Limpston.
Yeah, yeah. I think something's got, I think the gremlins have been busy in here today. So it is Limpston. I thought, I know where Underhill is. Right. So over to Jill. Oh, you're there, Jill. Seamless. That was seamless. So Jill Himsworth, Senior Planning Officer, will present the report.
Is that working? Yep, there we go. Apologies for that. Right, Limpston. This planning application is before the Planning Committee as the officer recommendation of approval. Is in conflict with comments received from the Parish Council and from the Ward Councillor. The site is here on the southern edge of Limpston. It's within the green wedge allocation as defined in the local plan, and the coastal preservation area falls just to the south of the site. So that's an aerial photograph of the site as it stands at the moment. So Underhill Close, to the north of the site, the land rises up. So this is at the top of the hill. You can see the railway cutting to the west of the site, and then the two nearest dwellings are number 8 Underhill Close here and number 3 Underhill Close here, as well as Highfield to the east of the site. The site has a long planning history, which is a material consideration in the consideration of the application, and planning for a single house was allowed on appeal in 2022. A further consideration is this site here, which was approved, an application was approved in 2024 for 2 dwellings. And at that time, that site was considered suitable and sustainable by East Evans Strategic Planning Committee. So you can see, I don't know whether you can just see, there's a black line along here which denotes the built-up area boundary. So this site is outside of the built-up area boundary, but the sites immediately adjacent to the site. They're not in the built-up area boundary in the current local plan, but in the emerging local plan, the built-up area boundary takes in this land here as well. So this is the existing site plan. The site currently comprises a temporary tarmac car park with street lighting, and the western side of the site is a paddock, and the site is surrounded by mature hedges and hedge banks. So outline approval is sought for the erection of 3 detached dwellings on the site, with all matters reserved. So this is the illustrative site layout, which indicates 3 dwellings on the site. So the total built form would be approximately 49 metres wide, with a maximum built depth of 13.5 metres. So the proposal follows the established building line of Highfield. The illustrative proposal shows modern flat-roofed dwellings, which are similar in appearance to the approval for the single dwelling on the site. The dwellings, as shown in the illustrative layout, are sat further back into the site than the approved dwelling, giving additional space between the dwellings at number 8 and number 3, Underhill Close. So that's a view from the car park looking back at number 8 and number 3, Underhill Close. So in terms of the accessibility of the site, obviously Lympstone is one of the villages in Strategy 727, which has a range of accessible services and facilities. So the site is just outside of the built-up area boundary, but immediately adjacent to it. The previous outline application was found to be acceptable at appeal. A subsequent variation application slightly increased the extent of the first floor accommodation at the site, and this appeal was renewed last year under application 25-1114 FUL. So there's no change in policy other than the application of the presumption in favour of sustainable development, but given that there is an extant approval for a significant single dwelling on this site, it's not thought that the principle of some residential development could be resisted. Also, in terms of the MPPF and making efficient use of land, the site would allow for 3 dwellings being constructed on the site, as opposed to the 1 currently approved, with a very small increase in built form on the site. So that's the illustrative site sections, stroke elevations. So you can see the existing ridgeline of Highfield, the existing dwelling there. So the proposed dwellings are relatively low in profile. The red dotted line here is the outline of the extent approval on the site for a single family dwelling. So that dwelling, which has already been approved, has an area of 690 square metres. This proposal would allow for 795 square metres across the 3 dwellings. So that's a 15% increase. As with the extant approval, the ground floor would be screened by the hedge. And in terms of the first floor, there would be a similar quantum of development, but unlike the approved scheme where the first floor would be read as a single block of accommodation, this would be split into smaller units, which would be more in keeping with the surrounding pattern of development. So in terms of the previous appeal decisions, in the first appeal, this is a view from Lympstone Public Footpath 4, looking back to the site. So you can see Highfield here and the application site just to the west. In terms of the first appeal, the inspector said that the dwelling would read against existing built form in Lympstone and would not impact upon the green wedge. And in terms of the second appeal, the inspector said something very similar along the lines of the dwelling, even though in that instance the first floor accommodation was slightly bigger than for the first appeal. It would still be predominantly single storey and would sit substantially below the ridge and chimney of Highfields and would not be incongruous in the context of the surrounding dwellings. So that's a view of the site there, looking back from the cycle path to the south of the site. So you can just see the ridge line of Highfield there. So the proposed dwellings would be beyond the ridge line in that view. In terms of residential amenity, the proposal allows for 22-metre spacing between the existing dwellings at number 8 and number 3, Underhill Close, with the existing mature hedge between them. So there's no reason to believe it would not be possible to design a scheme that would protect the amenity and privacy of existing occupiers. In terms of the railway noise, the development is slightly closer to the railway than the previously approved scheme. Therefore, the applicant has submitted a calculation of railway noise calculation, which has been assessed by Environmental Health, and there are no concerns in respect of railway noise. Network Rail have requested a condition be imposed to ensure a security fence to avoid trespassing on the railway. And in terms of accessibility, as I've said already, the previous appeal stated that the site's location, although it's outside of the built-up area boundary, it would be a short, the inspector said it would be a short and untaxing walk to Lympston's amenities. Therefore, it would not be reasonable based on that and the previous planning history that the site would not be in an accessible location for development. In terms of the ecological impact assessment, the existing hedges would be protected during the construction phase. In terms of BNG, the hedges would be lost in terms of because they would become in private gardens and wouldn't be maintained as they are at the moment. Therefore, it's likely that off-site units would need to be purchased by the applicant in order to achieve the 10% biodiversity net gain uplift. So that's a rendering of the of what the dwellings could look like. You can see the ridge of Highfield in the background. The existing approval has a number of permitted development rights removed, which were imposed by the Inspectorate Appeal to prevent additions which could be harmful to the green wedge, such as roof extensions, extensions to the building and any outbuildings. So it's considered appropriate for those to be carried on to any new appeal on this site. And we would also extend that to the site boundaries to ensure that the hedges were retained. So in terms of the planning balance, these points are on opposite sides of the scales, but really there are no adverse impacts of allowing these. These are all positive things. So the previous appeal history stated that the development would read as infill. It would lead to a more efficient use of the land. It would have a low landscape impact. There would be no impacts to residential amenity. It's in an accessible location. The proposal allows for ecological enhancements, and BNG off-site contributions would be sought. And there are no adverse impacts in comparison with the previously approved scheme. So on that basis, the application is recommended for approval subject to the below conditions, so the standard conditions in respect of time, plans, and the time for a reserved matters application, a construction environmental management plan, development to be undertaken in accordance with the ecological impact assessment, details of the trespass-proof fence to the railway, details of secure cycle storage, a surface water drainage scheme, removal of permitted development rights in respect of classes A, C, E and fences, and the submission of a water conservation strategy prior to commencement on site. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Young, thank you for your patience, waiting all day for your moment.
Thank you, Chair. I was here to hear the issues about the sewage as well, so it hasn't been a wasted day yet so far. Yeah, there's a substantial history to this site. It's always been in the green wedge, and we opposed it originally for a grand design type house spread over the whole site. It won on an appeal, and therefore there's a presumption of development there. So in some ways, 3 houses is better than 1. So it gives now more accommodation for at a reasonable price rather than a £2 million house set in that position. As the name of the next house suggests, Highfield House, it's right on the ridge, and that was one of the issues that was always considered, that it's right on the ridge and it can be seen from the Exmouth side of the estuary as you're cycling up, just beyond the allotments, just to explain where it is. The car park is there because it was required for South West Water when they were putting some extra tanks for the sewage works in our car park, so they had to dig up the car park, and they proposed to take this area over, and then once it was once the tanks had been put in and the car park restorated, that would be put back to agricultural use again. It never did because of the appeal was won for this one house, and at the moment it's being used because Environment Agency are needing the car park for their works, so we're actually using it again at the moment. So it is a brownfield site, but it could be argued it wasn't. I've never supported this application because it was Green Wedge. It has got some advantages over the original plan for 3 houses. I am concerned that permitted development rights might allow it to have an extra story put on at another time. So if this is approved, I would like permitted development rights to restrict issues like that on this very important location that is right on the edge of the village and right next to the coastal protection area, and it obviously will be still right next to the Green Wedge. Thank you.
Okay, I think some development rights have been removed by conditions 10 and 11, but I'm not sure they're enough. Okay, Councillor Wragg.
Yeah, only since the presentation of this did I was looking for the appeal decision, and I typed in the planning application number, and up came a letter, an email that was sent to me by the applicant in 2020-21. And in it, he's somebody who knows me. He knows, well, a lot of you will know him. He was a prominent developer. And he said he wanted the house to retire to and an annex attached for his elderly mother. Now, all of a sudden, this has morphed into 3 houses. And it's in the Green Wedge. So the alarm bells are ringing with me. I know we've got to judge this on what we've got before us, but I do know that residents of Lympstone are very concerned about losing their Green Wedge and Lympstone coalescing with Exmouth. And so I have serious reservations.
I'm just going to ask if there's a question in there.
Oh, sorry, no. Yes, there is actually. To Councillor Young, have I got the right application that I was looking at?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if it was a developer, but
It's the only one,
circumstances do change with elderly mothers, unfortunately.
Well, different name. Say same site. It says car park, and it ties in with what we got before us now. So that was the question, and I think I've said enough anyway. No, I didn't mean to. It was no, I didn't. I was
So
just.
what was the question? Just
It
remind me.
was, as I've just asked, whether it was the same site, and that's been confirmed by Councillor Young. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Councillor Levine.
Thank you, sir. I have got a question, but I'm totally obtuse at this stage in time. The place has been used as a car park. So why isn't it considered to be a brownfield site?
It is. It is in part. The paddock is not, but the part of it that is a car park is a brownfield site.
Is it in the green? Is the brownfield site in the green wedge? I mean, that's really what green wedge and brownfield site.
I think there's a complex history here, which Councillor Young alluded to, that the car park was approved as a temporary thing, and at the end of the Environment Agency's work, it was supposed to be restored to agricultural, which would have reinstated the green wedge. So it's a bit of a status quo thing, but I think probably time has moved on, and we didn't enforce it. Yeah, I think that's probably the issue. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much,
you were
Chair.
next, actually.
No, sorry.
So I'll take Ian and then you, Steve.
Thank you. Just a question to officers, please. I realise this is only 3 houses, but because it's on the outside the built-up. Don't answer it. It's a booty call. Sorry, even.
I think it might be somebody trying to call Andrew.
Just wanted to say, so I realise this is only 3 houses and you're not normally allowed to ask for affordable housing allocation, but because it's in the outside the built-up area boundary, are we allowed to ask for affordable housing on this? No?
I think it's still, yes, I think it's still too small, isn't it?
No, it would fall under the threshold for the requirement for them to provide affordable housing.
I think the proportion of affordable housing would be different if it was outside, but yeah.
It used to be.
You get silver.
Don't even suggest that. Probably. Okay. Yes, Steve, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm relatively new to all this on this council. Who actually uses this car park at the moment? And I see we have what's called a very generous parking allowance for 2 cars, but families often have more than 2 cars anyway these days. But who currently uses this car park, and wouldn't this represent actually a loss of parking?
Moment, it's unauthorised, so it's not being used as a car park. And I presume that the reason enforcement action wasn't taken was because the appeal was allowed, and therefore the site had approval for the construction of a single dwelling. And in terms of this application, there's 2 parking spaces. Well, it's outline application, but there's space for 2 parking spaces per dwelling plus cycle storage, which is in line with the local plan policy requirements.
Yeah, Councillor Young has some information.
Yeah, there's extra news on top of that, that the Environment Agency are doing flood resilience work down in the village, and they're having to use our car park. So at least a third of that is now being used for their depot. And so we got permission from the owner to reopen this car park for permit holders only of East Devon to use that, because there's a lot of permit holders that actually use that bottom car park. And that is only a temporary measure. They think their work will be over by August, so then it'll be closed again.
Okay. Any further questions? No? Okay. Do you want to kick us off, Mike?
Happy to kick us off and try and keep on subject rather than all the stories and everything else that aren't planning relevant. Right, so we have a brownfield site in the open countryside, as we call, but nevertheless there's no built-up area boundaries anymore. We have an outline application, so the details provided aren't relevant because they're in outline, and we're proposing removing most of the permitted development rights, correctly so, because it's in outline. How do we, I mean, there's no reason for refusal of this. I have two concerns. One is, again, sewage, because I'm fairly sure Lympstone hasn't yet fixed its sewage concerns, although the EA working there might help a little bit, but the other part is South West Water. And the second one is, how do we advise the applicant that the outline drawings they've given are acceptable, but no further than that should be considered, as in height, width? Already they're pushing the boundary line out towards the green wedge a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and it's just sort of putting the marker in to say, you've set your standard, you know, you'd have to really go some to disprove your standard you've now shown, because if you change the flat roof to a hipped roof and all the rest of it, all of a sudden that height goes up again and everything else. So I just want to try and put a marker down for the applicant to say, acceptable, good, because it's 3 instead of 1, but does that make any sense?
And can we condition that at this stage?
So we have full control over the scale and massing through the Reserve Matters application. My recommendation would be that just to note the comments that have been raised by members. I'm sure the applicant will be listening and aware. And obviously, if we feel that the scale and massing of what comes in at Reserve Matters is not acceptable, then we have the option to refuse the Reserve Matters application. I think putting in sort of height limits, etc., when we don't know ultimately what's coming forward, might create barriers that mean we get we don't get as good a scheme, even though that's what we're thinking. But I do think that there was a lot of discussion with the original outline about height, and I think that the applicants are aware of that, hence they've shown indicative flat roof dwellings. But I think that it's I think we could reasonably just give full consideration to any reserve matter as and when it comes in.
Councillor Young, you
Could I?
had some. Sorry,
with all
Mike.
due respect, Chair, we're in session.
Yeah.
You keep going back to the ward member. You don't normally let ward members speak. I think it's unfair to do so.
Okay.
All right. Second point I raised, though, was obviously sewage and possibility of a Grampian condition, etc.
While they're looking for that, I'll just say the reason I'm bringing the ward member in is for information, not to join in the debate. Okay.
You're asking for something I can give you, so. But you're asking about grampian condition.
Excuse me, he's in the chair.
Do we have an answer?
The question about Grampian.
Yes,
On the
please.
Grampian conditions.
Yes.
So we haven't had comments from South West Water on this application. They tend to look at schemes and decide whether to comment. But I'm aware that there is concern about capacity in the Lympstone area. And I would say that it wouldn't be unreasonable to add a condition, effectively a Grampian condition, saying that prior to the commencement of development, details of how foul water will be dealt with and evidence that there is capacity in the foul sewage network to deal with it shall be provided and agreed. And if it highlights the need for any improvements to capacity, those improvements should take place prior to occupation of the dwelling. So very similar to conditions that we've had earlier today.
Knew the works were happening and therefore it was subject to those works being done. Through you, Chair. Not like
I'm beginning to wonder if I'm here. Perhaps I've gone home already. Yeah, the only thing I'd say about that is, as before, South West Water haven't indicated the need for a Grampian condition, and as we're only looking at a maximum of 3 homes, I wonder how much it's needed, but I take the point that overall, yeah, it all adds up.
Could we ask what we asked previously then, if Mike's agreeable to that, that the officers check? So I don't think you can put a Grampian condition on. My understanding was, and you're the expert on this, but you're the expert on this. My understanding was a Grampian condition was when works were due. Well, but they're not, are they in the actual, they are planned. Well, in which case,
I think Mrs. Ormsby would also say, you know, you can only apply conditions in order to make the approval acceptable. Is that required in order to feel that this can be approved?
Effective sewage there, yes, that's one of the reasons we have to be here. We have to be sure that that there is sewage availability, isn't there? That is one of our statutory things we have to provide, isn't it?
So the reason in this instance I was agreeable to a Grampian condition is it's my understanding from recent discussions with South West Water that there are improvements programmed which should come forward within the lifetime of this application. And on that basis, I feel it would be reasonable to apply that Grampian condition. I think where we don't know that, then without the specific authority from South West Water, it wouldn't be appropriate to impose.
Then I'm very happy to second if Mike has recommended that or done whatever.
Okay, so with that condition, we have a proposal for approval, seconded by Councillor Barlow. So all those in favour? Seven for, 1 against, 2 abstentions. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, all good. That's up to now.
Okay. In that case, that brings the public part of our meeting to a close. But we do have a Part B item. So I will ask the Vice Chair, I don't think this will take very long, but I'll ask the Vice Chair to propose that we move into Part B.
God. Under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting as exempt information of the description set out on the agenda is likely to be disclosed. And on balance, the public interest is in discussing this item in private session. Part B.
Okay, all in favour? I think that was unanimous.